Well, hello, and welcome to this third edition of the In Between. This is a series that I started that I am doing in between the sermons. So it's our continuation of our study in First Samuel. And so this week, we're picking up in Samuel 14, and we're looking at verses 24 to 52. So this is actually a continuation of the last one, or part two of our previous lesson. And as we looked at earlier, chapter 14, the Israelites are surrounded by a Philistine army, and Saul's son Jonathan decides to go off on his own along with his armor bearer. And the reason Jonathan did this is he had great faith and trust in the Lord that God was going to give them the victory. And so they go off and start a campaign on their own. And while he's doing this, his father Saul, who is the king, is just sitting there and waiting, not really doing anything, not really sure what to do. And so Jonathan and his armor bearer lead this campaign, and it scared the Philistines so much so that confusion breaks out in camp, and they take off running, and then the Israelites head out to pursue after them. And so we pick that up then here starting in verse 24. So let's take a look at that. Let's start here. Now, the Israelite soldiers were in a difficult situation that day because Saul had bound the troops by a solemn pledge. Anyone who eats anything before evening, when I have taken revenge on my enemies, is doomed. So none of the army then ate anything. The troops came across a honeycomb with honey on the ground. But even when they came across the honeycomb, with the honey still flowing, no one ate any of it because the troops were afraid of the solemn pledge. But Jonathan had heard his father make the people swear the pledge, so he dipped the end of the staff he was carrying into the honeycomb. And when he ate some, his eyes lit up. Then one of the soldiers spoke up. Your father bound the troops by a solemn pledge. Anyone who eats food today is doomed. That's why the troops are exhausted. Jonathan said, my father has brought trouble to the land. Look how my eyes lit up when I tasted just a bit of that honey. It would have been better if the troops had eaten some of their enemies' plunder today when they found it. But now the Philistines' defeat isn't as thorough as it might have been. That day, after they had fought the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, the troops were completely exhausted. So the troops tore into the plunder, taking sheep, cattle, and calves. They slaughtered them right on the ground and devoured them with the blood still in them. When it was reported to Saul, the troops are sinning against the Lord by eating meat with blood in it, Saul said, all of you are traitors. Roll a large stone over here right now, and go among the troops and say to them, everyone must bring their ox or sheep and slaughter them here with me. Don't sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it. So everyone brought whatever they had and slaughtered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he had built to the Lord. And so this section starts off with Saul taking a solemn pledge that no one should eat anything until evening, until he has taken revenge on his enemies, and to do so meant that you were to be doomed. Now, perhaps the reason that Saul did this was because he didn't want anyone to stop and take a break while they pursued the Philistines. He wanted them to just keep on going and totally defeat their enemy and not take a break for food. Because it wasn't like they could just stop at the local quickie mart, and get something to eat. I mean, it involved quite the process to stop and take a break and prepare food and get all this. And so he probably didn't want them to stop and do that. He wanted to just keep on going. So that's probably why he made this this pledge, this declaration. But Jonathan didn't hear this. Well, because he was off fighting his own battle, leading his own. He and his armor bearer were taking care of the Philistines on their own, so he didn't hear his father, the king Saul, make this pledge. So when he comes across this honeycomb and he sees it, he's like, "Oh, hey!" And he dips his staff into it and takes a bite. Now you gotta remember, they didn't have candy back then, so honey would have been a sweet treat, a welcome delight, and to find that would have been rare. And so Jonathan sees this and he's like, "Oh, hey, wow!" And he dips his staff in there and takes a bite, and it says his eyes lit up. Whoa, this is good stuff. Sweet treat. And so as soon as Jonathan eats this, though, one of the other soldiers speaks up and tells him, hey, your father made this pledge that if anyone stopped to eat anything, they would be doomed and they would probably be brought upon them. But how does Jonathan reply to this? Because he obviously didn't hear his father say that. He says, my father has brought trouble to the land. Look at my eyes. See how they lit up when I ate this? I was refreshed. The honey refreshed me. Just think how much harder we could have fought today if we would have stopped and had something to eat. We could have stopped along the way and had some of our enemies' plunder that we came across. Now, I find this to be true, because how do you feel if you haven't eaten anything all day? Do you really feel like going out and doing a bunch of hard work? Do you feel like working out or doing all these things? No. I know if I just miss one meal, I feel awfully weak. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but well, I mean, we know this to be true, that we're not at our best when we haven't eaten anything. Food gives us energy and strength. And so Jonathan says, if we would have just done this, just think how much greater the defeat of the enemy would have been, how much harder and stronger we could have pursued after them and defeated them. But because we haven't eaten anything all day, we're exhausted, we're tired. I mean, it made sense. And so they fought all day and they were hungry. And so they decided they're going to tear into this enemy's plunder. And so they took the sheep, calves, and cattle, and they slaughtered them all right there. And right there on the ground, they devoured them, it says, with the blood still in the meat. Now, I don't know if I've ever been that to actually take an animal, slaughter right then and there, and just go to town and start eating. I mean, I've never been quite like that. But that's obviously how hungry how they were. They just didn't even bother to cook it, ate it raw right there, right after they killed it. Well, this is a big no-no. You're not supposed to eat meat with the blood still in it. Instead, all the animals were to be slaughtered at the temple, and to eat that animal with the blood still was a sin. And so this is why Saul, as we see, he calls them traitors. He calls them traitors. One, because they broke the pledge, and two, because they sinned before God by doing this. So that's why we see that Saul builds an altar to the Lord, and it's there that they can sacrifice the animals in a proper way and be able to eat some food and get refreshed and nourished. All right, well, let's look at the next section. So now at verse 36. Let's go after the Philistines tonight and plunder them until morning, Saul said. We won't leave a single survivor. Do whatever you think is best, the troops replied. But the priest said, let's go ask God first. So Saul questioned God. Should I go after the Philistines? So when it says that Saul questioned God, it didn't mean that he's questioning what God's going to be doing. No, he's asking God a question God. So here's his question. Should I go after the Philistines? Will you hand them over to Israel? But God did not answer him that day. Then Saul said, all you officers in the army, come forward. Let's find out what sin was committed today. As surely as the Lord lives, the one who has saved Israel, even as my own son Jonathan, that person will be executed. Not one of the soldiers answered him. So Saul said to all Israel, you be on one side, and my son and Jonathan and I will be on the other. Do whatever you think is best, the troops said. Then Saul asked the Lord God of Israel, why haven't you answered your servant today? If the wrongdoing is mine or my son's Jonathan's, respond with Urim. What if the wrongdoing belongs to your people Israel? Respond with Thummim. Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the troops were cleared. Then Saul said, decide between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was selected. Tell me what you've done, Saul said to Jonathan. So Jonathan told him, I only took a very small taste of honey on the end of my staff, he said, and now I'm supposed to die? May God deal harshly with me, and worse still if you don't die today, Saul swore. But the troops said to Saul, why should Jonathan die when he was the one who won this great victory for Israel? No way. As surely as the Lord lives, not one hair of his head will fall to the ground, because he did this today with God's help. So the troops rescued Jonathan, and he wasn't executed. Then Saul stopped chasing the Philistines, and the Philistines went back to their own country. And so after they've taken a break and they've gotten something to eat, then Saul decides that they should continue what they were doing and pursue the Philistines, through the evening and on into the morning. And the troops agreed, but the priest says, well, wait a minute, let's ask God first. Now, this is always good advice, right? And no matter what we do, I think we should ask God first. So the priest has a smart move on his part. And so the way that they would question God, as it says, the way that they would do it is with the Urim and the Thummim. Now, we had talked about this earlier, but basically these would have been what would be like dice that the priest had in the priestly robe, had these things called the Urim and the Thummim. And so as we see here, when Saul is trying to question what God says, he says he divides the troops on one side and he and his son Jonathan on another. And it says that if it's to respond to the troops, then it will come up Urim, and for myself and my son Jonathan, it'll be the Thummim. And so when they would roll these two things, it was known as as casting lots. We see that throughout the Bible, and it had three different answers. It would come up with a yes, a no, or we don't know. So a question mark, we don't know. I'm not sure exactly what these actually look like. Some say they maybe had like a series of dots, but it would have been like dice back then. And so the Urim and the Thummim. And so Saul rolls these at first, or I'm sorry, has the priest roll these, and God didn't answer. So Saul realized something's up. God doesn't answer us in this. Something's up. And so then we see he splits them up, and he adds the troops on one side, and he and his son Jonathan on the other. And it comes down to the reason God didn't answer them is it something that Jonathan did. So Saul questions him, like, what did you do? And Jonathan's response is, I ate some honey. Okay, I ate some honey. Because that, I'm supposed to die. I mean, it seems ridiculous, right? And Jonathan's exaggerating this point here, but that's ridiculous. But Saul is sticking with his guns. I mean, he made this pledge, and he is sticking with it. And he's ready to do his own son in. But it's the troops that come to his rescue. The troops come to Jonathan's rescue, and they say, listen, it was Jonathan that gave us this great victory. Jonathan was the one that led that attack, not you. Jonathan was the one that sent the Philistines on the run and got us to this point. And so we see that it's Jonathan is the one that the troops respect, the one the troops follow. Jonathan is the one who's acting like the king, not his father Saul. So there's a great divide already starting to happen. We see the Saul's reign, and he can't even have respect for the troops start to slip away. And so it ends here with the Israelites going back to their home and the Philistines going back to their home. Now let's look at the final section of this chapter. Verse 47. Saul secured his kingship over Israel. He fought against his enemies on every side, against Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the king of Zobah, and the Philistines. And wherever he turned, he was victorious. He acted heroically, defeating the Amalekites and rescuing Israel from the power of any who had plundered them. See, this was the role of what the king was, to lead the armies. And Saul did that. We see he fought many victories and had many defeats of their enemies. And now we see a list of Saul's lineage. So Saul's sons were Jonathan, who we already know about, Ishvi, and Malchishua. And the names of his two daughters were Merab, the oldest, and Michal, the younger daughter. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, Ahimaaz's daughter. The name of his general was Abner, Ner's son, Saul's uncle. Kish, Saul's father, and Ner, Abner's father, were Abiel's sons. There was fierce warfare against the Philistines throughout Saul's lifetime. So whenever Saul saw a strong or heroic man, he would add him to his troops. So we see that throughout Saul's life, throughout his reign, this battle between the Israelites and the Philistines continues. And it's because of what I mentioned before, that they were neighboring groups, and in a small territory, the whole area of Israel was very small. And so the Philistines were on the side of the Mediterranean, and the Israelites were in the central highlands. And so there's always a constant battle between land, because land meant wealth and power. And so throughout Saul's lifetime, they're always at war with Philistine. And so whenever he saw someone who was strong or heroic, Saul then would add him to his troops. This is exactly what Samuel said to the people when they wanted to have a king. This is exactly what he said the king would do. The king would take your sons and make him pull his chariots and fight in his armies. And we see this taking place exactly like how Samuel had shared. All right, well, that ends this edition of The In-Between. I hope you're enjoying this study and to continue on. And next time, we're going to look at David versus Goliath. We'll see you then.